use that in your merge field later of thank you for your gift on. This is the date that it's going to pull from. Thank you for your gift of amount. This is the field that it's going to pull from. Thank you for your gift of amount that you gave on date to the, let's say, unrestricted fund, if you wanted to put that in. These fields are what are available for you to put into your letter. So let's say John Watson gave us a $500 gift to the unrestricted fund, because let's say we have our annual campaign going on and he gave because his friend Sherlock Holmes personally solicited him. Let's select the method of cash for now. And you can put in any notes about the gift as well if needed. Also, if you're tracking certain custom fields about the gift, go ahead and fill those out. Another thing I wanted to point out is because Sherlock Holmes personally solicited him, let's go ahead and add a soft credit to Sherlock Holmes. Now, I know a lot of you are going to ask, what is a soft credit? A soft credit is a way to give a constituent credit for a gift that came in because of them, even though the gift did not necessarily come out of their own pocket. 6th and the 8th grade level. This is not to mean that, you know, this is not to imply that this is the reading level that your constituents are at, but, you know, you're not writing a thesis or a scientific paper. Something like that would be about the 11th or 12th grade level. The reason we want it to be between 6th and 8th grade is this makes it easier for your letter recipients to scan through the message and absorb that message, as opposed to something that they need to put a lot of work into reading and interpreting. So ideally, you would want that between a 6th and an 8th grade level. So I didn't personalize the letter content here very much, but for your purposes, I know a lot of you put more effort into personalizing your letters. So that's a handy tool that you can use as well. Now we're going to go to our filters. Once we're happy with our letters, and we can always change this later on if we're not, while we're here, I'm going to click Save and Keep Editing just to make sure we don't lose any of our work. Let's go into our filter. So we have filters here that are already excluded, I should say. And if you're not sure what a filter does, you can always click on it. So in this case, it's excluding any constituents who are inactive or deceased. Also, we are excluding constituents who have a communication restriction of do not mail. Since this is designed to be a mailing, we don't want to send them a letter. We are also excluding soft credits in this particular letter. Now, if you are writing a letter specifically for your soft credits, you could drag and drop that filter up to the include part, and now this is going to be designed for soft credits. Now, of course, when you do that, you probably want to go back into your design and think of what fields you want to include to your letter if that's what your audience is. For today, we'll drag that back to exclude, and we'll start working on our includes. Now, this is really where your process comes into play. When do you typically send, or when do you typically run your thank you letters? You know, do you have a process in place, for example, around, you know, you send your letters every Friday, somebody from your organization runs the letters, prints them out, and stuffs them into envelopes? Or do you do this every day, or however your process is? An easy thing that we find most folks filter on is date. And again, you have different date fields here. The date that we're referencing is the date that's entered into this field. So you can select a dynamic field like this. For example, date is during last week. These are dynamic fields, so the date depends on when you run the letter. So week goes by Sunday to Saturday. So if we're talking about last week, we're talking about the previous Sunday to Saturday, not the current week that we're on. So the previous Sunday to Saturday. If we're talking about this week, it goes from this Sunday until this coming Saturday. So it depends when you're running your letters. So let's pretend that today is Friday, for example, and I run my letters at the end of the week. So I'm going to say letters this week. So this is going to pick up any gifts that came in between Sunday and today. Today, pretending it's Friday. So we're going to click OK, but hold on. But that might mean we might be missing some Saturdays. So if I ran this letter last week, for example, and it ran on a Friday, a gift might have come in on a Saturday, and this filter is not going to pick it up. This is where the acknowledgments fields comes in handy. Remember, going back to John's gift, there's a field here called acknowledged, and it's saying no. So as a nice catch-all, I like including a field, or the field in there for acknowledgement status is no. And this just tells the system, hey, give me any gifts that came in this week, but also if there's any gift that I haven't acknowledged yet, that I haven't gotten to yet, or maybe it fell into one of those in-between days, grab them and include them into this letter anyway. And as you can see, our numbers went way up to accommodate for that. So that's a great filter to include. So let's say we have those filters. We're going to click Save and then let's preview. Let's see what this looks like. So it's showing here that this is the number of transactions that has been found. This is the number of households that has been found, and it's looking for household because we said create one letter per household. So between this many households, there's this many gifts. So it's going to group those gifts together in just one letter for that household. But it also says that there are households being skipped. Why is that? So you can see here, there's tabs for the design preview. Again, this is kind of what it's going to look like, what information it's going to have. You're going to see the recipients, which means these are the actual 23 that are being generated, and these are the skipped recipients. So let's look at these two. If we go to the recipients, these are households or individuals or organizations who are going to receive the letter, who we're going to generate the letter for. I'm being careful about saying receive because you still need to print them out and actually mail them. But these are the folks who we will be generating the letters for. And we also have the skipped recipients. Why are they being skipped? You'll see here that there are some address issues. There are some folks who have a bad address, and some folks also have merge field issues. So this could be they have a blank street or they have multiple values for date. Now it's picking this up because I'm going to go back to make changes here, right? If we go into our details, there was a section that said allow blank merge fields. Now, if we go back to our design and let's say we don't have someone's address, this would just be blank. And if we allow it, the system will allow you to generate that letter even though that field is blank. But because it's not selected, it's alerting us to the fact that, hey, you have blank fields in there. Are you sure you want to run your letters with blank fields? Or bad, incomplete, or missing addresses? That's what it's referring to. Another thing that it told us the error was there are multiple values for date. So if there is a donor that has more than one gift that meets the filters, well, which date are we going to use? The system is not going to make that determination for you, but it alerts you, hey, you have someone in there with more than one gift. We probably don't want to use this merge field. We can include date here in the data table because the data table itemizes all of the gifts, but the merge field itself can only accommodate one date. So for example, in this case, if we take this field out for your, let's say just leave amount, and amount will total, so we're not going to have a problem there. We're likely going to see some of those skipped go away, at least for that reason. They may still be skipped for other reasons, but it will allow them to go through. That merge field won't be a problem anymore. So we're going to go back to preview, and that number has gone up. We still have some skipped recipients. It's alerting me there are a couple of folks in there that have bad addresses. We have a help article that can give you some guidance around how to handle bad and incomplete addresses. Or later on, when we go into the Ncoa processing, you can see how you can turn that on as well. So great. So this looks more like what I expected. So we're going to run this letter. Now, don't be afraid. When you click run, there's always an option to confirm, right? And you have the option here to do a test. It's going to generate just the first 5 letters within your letters, or the letters that are going to get generated. It's not going to generate everything yet. It's not going to create any interactions yet, and it's not going to get added to the recent mailings. You just want to verify that this looks correct. I also like using this option, especially if you have pre-printed letterheads. You know, this is the letter that you print out and maybe hold up against the light to see if you adjust the margins, for example. This is a letter that you print out if you're more comfortable proofreading a printed out letter as opposed to the computer, or maybe you're running it by someone and they can proofread on the printed out letter instead. So this is just your test. You want to see that everything looks right. Maybe you want to see, are these the merge fields I really want to put in there? This is what the merge fields look like, and you can adjust before printing the entire batch. Or you can go ahead and generate all of the letters. When you generate all of the letters, it's going to create an interaction for each letter. So if John Watson, for example, gets this letter, he's going to get the interaction on his timeline. It's also going to add to the most recent mailings, and these are the letters that you intend to send. So let's go ahead and actually, let's see, and run that now. Now, this is still a fail-safe. Even though I'm running this, I haven't printed it yet. It's going to generate for me a PDF of all the letters, so I still have time to check if I want to change anything before I can actually print them, before I actually print them out. All right. So after it's finished running, you're going to see here you have the opportunity to download the letters themselves. These are the PDF files that you intend to print, as well as download the addresses. So let's say you're generating mailing labels. This is the file that you would use to do that. Now, once we download the letters, let's go back to letter home. A couple of things are going to happen. First, it's going to get added to the most recent mailing. And from here, anytime you see those drop-down arrows, see what they do. You can download the letters again. Let's say you misplace the file, you can download the addresses, or you can delete the mailing. We'll come back to this. Another thing that happens is, let's see, was John Watson included in the mailing? I don't believe so, but we had, I believe it was Big Kahuna Burger that got a letter in there. There it is. So they made this donation. There's this interaction that was generated on their timeline because we ran that letter. And if we go into that donation, it has flipped the acknowledge flag from no to yes, and there is a link to the letter itself. If I want to make changes to this particular letter, let's say I wanted to personalize this letter more, I can click into this letter, and under generated letters here, if I click that, this shows me the actual letter that Big Kahuna Burger received. So this is where you can see that it's pulling in the information on the merge fields as well as the data table. Now, if I wanted to personalize this letter further, I can edit letter from here, and it's only going to make edits to this particular letter, not the letter template, not the entire batch, only this letter. So if I wanted to add some personalization here, let's pretend I add some personalization there. I can click Save, and then I can download the letter again, so I have an updated version of the letter that I can send to the constituent. Now, what happens if, so in this case, we only personalize Big Kahuna Burger's letter. What happens if we need to make a change to the entire batch? Let's say I have the PDFs and maybe I printed them out, and then I noticed that, oh no, I misspelled something, or I wanted to use a different merge field, and I kind of wanted to undo the entire mailing. There is an option in here to delete. And what this does is it will delete the letter PDF and remove the interactions from the mailing. And then you have the option if you want to reset the acknowledgement field to no, or keep it at yes. So if we click yes here, it's going to remove that interaction, and the acknowledged flag is going to flip back to no. And then I can make my changes to the letter. I can rerun the letter, and then it will kick off that process again, where it will generate the interaction and generate the PDFs of the letter. Great questions that we have here. I'll take a look. Well, let's answer some of these questions before we take a look at our Ncoa processing. Sandra asks, do you have an example of an in-kind letter? What fields would you use in that letter? I believe so. I have a weekly thank you in here for in-kind. So let's take a look at that. So in this case, I'm saying we want to thank you for your donation of in-kind description valued at in-kind fair market value. So this is interesting because typically for in-kind gifts, you may not know what the value is. So we see a lot of you enter the amount as 0. And if an amount is provided, entering that amount into in-kind fair market value. Taking note that it is the donor's responsibility to declare a value. So unless this is a value that they gave to you, or if you're in Canada, they've provided an appraised amount. If you don't have that value, you probably don't want to include this field and estimate on your own. And you can see here what I've included in the data table is the date, the fund, the in-kind type, which is going to say if it's a good or a service, the in-kind description. Again, the description is whatever you input into that field. And then in this case, I have an in-kind fair market value. Great question. Let's take a look at a different sample as well. For example, pledge payments. When pledge payments come in, you might want to put in fields. For example, we wanted to thank you for your pledge amount that you made on pledge date. We receive your payment of the date, the amount and date. And if you wanted to itemize the different payments that have been received, you can use a data table for that. So again, think about, go to your transaction. What fields would you like to include into the letter? See if there's a merge field for that. We have a great question here. How do you copy letters? So our thank you letter 1, for example, we like the formatting, we've adjusted the margins, we've inserted our logo, we've inserted the signature, and I don't want to have to redo that every time when I'm creating a different letter. What I can do is I can click on the drop-down arrow here and click copy. What that's going to do is it's going to create another letter that's just going to say thank you letter 1, copy. It's going to look exactly the same. The design is going to be the same. The filters is going to be the same, but you can always go in there change the name, adjust your filters for what type of letter you want it to be. Great question. Can we select specific recipients from the list to add or remove? Great question. So if I'm reading that correctly, let's say you run your preview and you see that, oops, let's go back. Oh, because we already ran the letter. So no one's in there right now. If you have a handful of constituents that you want to include or exclude, you can use the Find Constituents filter if you don't want them to receive this particular letter. For example, in this case, you would go to Constituent, Include, Find Constituent, and let's say if we didn't want Big Kahuna Burger to receive this letter, I would add their name in there. And this is kind of overriding, even if they meet our filters, I don't want them to receive this letter for whatever reason. You could do it that way. Great question. All right. We also said, so let's go back to John Watson. We also said another thing that you can do, or another way you can generate the letter, is upon saving, you can use this option to generate the letter upon save. So when you do that, you can select any transaction letter with the purpose of acknowledgement and run that letter for this specific constituent. For example, if we want our thank you letter 1, we can click Generate Save. And when we click Save, it's going to take us directly to the letter editor just for this particular constituent. So you can see here, this is the same screen that we were on when we personalized Big Kahuna Burger's letter. So I can just, if there's no edits I want to change here, I can go ahead and download the letter. But I see that there is a weird comma there that's kind of hanging, so we can edit the letter and take that out. And you can even see here, even though we're in John Watson's account, because we are running the letter by household, it's addressing it to both John and his wife, Mary. So we can save, and if we wanted to, we can download the letter here and get it printed and sent out to John and Mary. There's a comment here. I would think you would insert a table when you have multiple donations. Do you need to do that when there is only one donation? Does it need to be itemized out? It does not. We're just using it as an example here, but absolutely, if there's only one donation, you don't have to use the data table. If you do, even though there's only one gift, then that's just kind of a different way of displaying the information. So you can or not, that's up to you. Wonderful. All right.
Yeah.
Yes.
Sorry, can you answer a question for us? I saw several people early on who are asking a question about using the household or individual. What if they want to get organizations to come up? What is the best way to do that as far as setting up their letter?
So if we go back to our letters, that's a great question. So let's say thank you letter 1, right? Notice that Big Kahuna Burger is actually an organization, but they still got the letter. So because we're selecting household here, it doesn't exclude or doesn't automatically exclude organizations. This just means that this is still going to individuals who are not in a household. It's going to organizations. And if the individual is in a household, then it's going to use the household name fields, or it's going to total giving for the household. And that's why it's important, if you go back to your letter, looking at those name fields that's common to everyone. So if we go back to Big Kahuna Burger, which is an organization account, noted by that briefcase, they still have an informal name, so they're still going to get pulled into the letter as long as they meet the filters, and it's going to use this informal name even if they're an organization. Great question. All right. Let's jump to our NCOA processing. So we said earlier we had a couple of letters that had missing or incomplete addresses. You know, there's several ways that you can fix that, right? If you can find an address for them, great. If you, but there is a way in Bloomerang where that can happen automatically. Now, if you're an admin user in your database, you can go to Settings and your organization and scroll down. There's a section here for NCOA. Now, I already have mine enabled in my demo database, so it's the same View NCOA Dashboard. In your database, if you're seeing a button that says Activate NCOA Processing, you can just click on that and you can get the benefits of NCOA processing as often as nightly. And if you have a standard license with Bloomerang, this comes free with your standard license as well. Now, how does this work? There's a couple of ways that this works. Let's take a look at this constituent, and we're going to go to their address. Now, if I click on her address here, it's going to show me an NCOA note. And the only time you would get an address note like this if there was an NCOA run in your database. So it's going to show NCOA update, which is when was the update made. It's going to show you a move date if the reason was moved. So this is the move date that was found by USPS. The reason was moved, and it's also going to show you the old address. The NCOA processing is never going to delete data in your database. It's only going to add new information or update existing information. So when you do your NCOA updates, there are several reasons that you might see here. In this case, it's a move. So if a move is found, a note is going to get added to the address. The new address that's been found is going to get added to the constituents account, and that new address is going to be marked as primary. This means that when I run those letters, it's going to reference that new primary address that is updated by the USPS. Another reason that you might see here is if it's standardized. Standardized means it's going to look at things like Ave versus avenue spelled out, street, ST versus street spelled out, road, RD versus road spelled out. If the apartment number is on a second line, it's going to standardize all of that based on US Postal Service standards. And the reason that you're going to see there is standardized. A third reason you might see on the NCOA note is if it's non-mailable. Now, this comes directly from the US Postal Service. So for whatever reason, if the US Postal Service says that this address is non-mailable, you're going to have a reason here that says non-mailable, and it's going to mark the address as bad automatically. So that's the only time that may automatically happen, is if the USPS finds that this address is non-mailable. All of this happens if you turn on the NCOA updates, and I say as often as nightly because the data in your database is compared against the data from the USPS on the previous Sunday. And if a change is found, then your database can get updated. But that also depends on how often you're entering information into your database. You know, maybe you had an NCOA, maybe you had an update yesterday and you entered some new information today. That could get updated overnight because you're getting new information into your database. So that's the nice thing here, is that all of it happens automatically and you can report on all of these updates. So if you go into your database or into your reporting, first, whenever an update is made to your database, you're also going to receive a confirmation email that tells you how many records were updated in your database. But if you're like me and you still want to see those updates for yourself, you can I'm going to open up this email, and you can see here that I'm filtering has any specific address where note contains NCOA. Again, that note is only going to get there if there's an NCOA update. And I've added a column for primary note, which is pulling in that field. So you can see, for example, here it says NCOA update the date, reason non-mailable, reason standardized, or reason moved. So if you wanted to get more granular, for example, you can even isolate it to that. So maybe instead of just looking at all the NCOA updates, I want to take a look at, hey, which addresses are the NCOA saying that it's non-mailable? Let's take a look at that and how can we fix that? Maybe we have an email address for the constituent. Let's send them an email address. Let's see if we can get them to update their mailing address. Things like that. So you can get a general report of just all of the constituents that were updated via NCOA, or you can get granular and see what kind of updates were made and see the details for each of those constituents there. Another thing that happens with the NCOA updates is it also comes with deceased suppression. And what this means is it is going to look for a first name, last name, and address match. And if a deceased record is found, it's automatically going to mark the constituents as deceased in your database. Now, this is another good thing to run reports on, because this is a very sensitive topic. And of course, you want to validate and take appropriate action. You don't want to be sending solicitation mailings, for example, if the constituent is already deceased, or if you want to go the extra mile and send a note to the family, for example, you want to approach that with more information. Typically for something like this, you saw in our settings earlier that I have the option to go into my NCOA dashboard that has a little bit more information. For example, they might have a link to the obituary that you can take a look at and you can get more information. And again, the NCOA processing comes free with your database if you have a standard license within Bloomerang. And that's how our NCOA process works. I know we're about at time here, but I'm gonna launch a poll. If you'd like a follow-up to learn more about how you can access NCOA processing, let us know in the poll. But in the meantime as well, I'm gonna go through some of these leftover questions here. So if you need to hop off, thank you so much for joining us today. If you have some unanswered questions, I'm gonna go through some of those questions now. Margie, are there any questions jumping out at you that a lot of folks have been asking?
I did see a couple here. Someone was asking if there's a letter template for year-end tax letters.
Great question. We don't have a pre-built letter template for year-end tax letters. We do have a help article in our knowledge base that walks you through the recommended merge fields that you can use. Toward the end of the year and beginning of next year, we'll also have classes around how you can filter and look at that information in a report, so you can plug that into your letter as the filters. But in terms of the template itself, we don't have a pre-built letter template for that, but we have a sample in our knowledge base. Great question. There's a question here. Can you choose generate letter on save in a Google Sheet batch entry? You cannot. When you choose generate letter on save, that's designed for you're generating a letter for that specific donor and that specific gift. So you can't use the generate a letter on save in batches. Great question. Is there a way to retire or make a letter template inactive so that it is no longer showing up as an option, but can still be kept in the library? Great question. So if you'll notice, if you work with our emails, there is a way to deactivate the email templates. There is no option for that in our letter editor. You can delete the letter template, but again, that removes it entirely from your database. What we've seen some of our customers do is they'll adjust the name of the template to say archive or retired, do not use, something like that to indicate that. But that's a great suggestion for our product team. If you would like to make that suggestion, you can click on the question mark icon in your database and then go to our features portal and make that suggestion there. The great thing about you making this suggestion instead of us just forwarding it is that you can get updates if there's movement on that suggestion. So for example, if we're working on it, you'll get an update, or if it gets implemented, you'll get an update, and other folks can upvote that suggestion as well. Great question. Can you send a letter and acknowledge a list with tribute donations? Yes, so you can send an acknowledgement letter to the donor. We do have merge fields for the tribute type as well as the tribute name. So you can include those as merge fields in your letter. Great question here. If you have some constituents with only email addresses and some with only addresses, am I correct that you need to run two separate processes, one in letters, one in email, to run those acknowledgements? But you do get to use the same acknowledgement letter when doing so. This is a little bit tricky. So we mentioned earlier that the letters and emails don't talk to each other. You can certainly replicate the same type of letter or the same type of email and vice versa, so they look the same. So we see a lot of nonprofits use this a lot for if they have an email address for a constituent, instead of paying for postage to send a letter, they'll send an email first and then just run a letter for those for whom they don't have any email addresses. So in that case, there's two ways you can solve that. One, if you run your email first and it's already acknowledged, if you use that filter for acknowledged as no, it's already going to filter out anyone who's already been acknowledged using the email. Or you can specifically filter for or you can specifically exclude anyone who has an email address in your database. So essentially you're telling the system only generate this letter if they don't have an email address with us, assuming that you will generate that email acknowledgement for them. Great questions. And I think that's all the questions I'm seeing. Is there anything else, Margie?
I do see one that was talking about tribute donations. I don't know if we answered that one. Can you send a letter and acknowledge a list with tribute donations?
You can send a letter to the donor with the tribute information. So for example, let's say Pepper Potts gave in honor of Tony Stark. I can include that in the letter to say, hi Pepper, thank you for your gift of amount in honor of or in memory of tribute named Tony Stark. You can include that information. Yes, in terms of if you're talking about sending a note to the family, for example, and for gifts that came in honor or in memory of someone, that's a little bit of a lengthier process, but we can send over our help documentation that walks you through that process. Great questions. Well, thank you so much, everyone. We apologize for the snafu a little bit earlier when we started and the screen being blurry, but I hope that you picked up a couple of new tips and tricks to help you run your acknowledgement letters. And we hope that we see you in another Academy class soon. And we hope you have a great rest of your day. Have a great day. Bye.